Hello and welcome to the Financial Aid 101 presentation, everything you need to know about getting money for college. My name is Adam Essex and I work with Federal Student Aid of the U.S. Department of Education in Washington, and it's a pleasure to meet with you today. Some of the topics we're going to cover during today's presentation include what can college do for you? What are some of the financial aid myths that are out there? We'll discuss financial aid programs. We'll talk about our aid application, which is the FAFSA, and I'll discuss when and how you're going to apply. I'll discuss what to expect after applying, scholarships, state aid and institutional aid, and also I'm going to be taking your questions throughout this session. So if you think of any questions or you brought some questions to the session, feel free to type them into the questions dialog box. I'll be monitoring those as we go along and answering them as I'm able. So what can college do for you? College basically means increased income for the vast majority of people that pursue it. It means more job opportunities and more freedom. So essentially, education in and of itself is going to enable you to have many more choices in your life. So not only about money, but also where you live, the type of work that you do, other opportunities, job mobility. And it is a fact that on average, a person who goes to college earns more money than a person who doesn't. And over a lifetime, a college graduate can earn over $1 million more than a high school graduate. So while money isn't the most important thing in the life, it is important to recognize that going for a higher education can increase your earning potential significantly over your life. Let's talk about the college costs. Every institution has its own costs, and we call them typically the cost of attendance. Think of it as like a sticker price for a car. The cost of attendance for a typical university would include tuition and fees. That's the one we've all heard about. Room and board, books and supplies, equipment and transportation, miscellaneous expenses, childcare, etc. So all of these things are potential costs that you will incur when you enroll in college. And there are higher cost institutions and lower cost institutions, but all of them have typically these components as part of their overall costs. It's very important that you understand what the total cost of attendance is at the school you think you're going to attend or know you're going to attend, so that you can make an informed decision about where to go and get the best bang for your buck. There are a lot of myths about financial aid, and I wanted to briefly touch on a few of these. First, people think that because it costs money to apply for aid, they think that it costs to apply for financial aid, which absolutely doesn't. Applying for financial aid is free, so you don't have to provide any money in order to be considered for and receive financial aid. It's absolutely free to apply. Next, there's another myth that the form is too hard to fill out. In reality, the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, is easier than ever to fill out, especially if you fill it out online at our website, which is www.fafsa.gov, fafsa.gov. Definitely the way to fill out the FAFSA. In the past, we had a paper-based process, which was very much more involved and took a lot longer than the online application does. The final myth I wanted to talk about was the concern about parental income. Some people think my parents make too much money, so I won't qualify for aid. And keep in mind that there is no income minimum or maximum when it comes to financial aid. Furthermore, there are many different types of financial aid, from scholarships to grants, work study, loans, etc. So when you're completing the FAFSA, you're being considered for a wide array of financial aid. So it's very important to complete your FAFSA, and we'll talk about the timing of that in just a few moments. Let's talk about the federal student aid programs. They fall into three broad categories. The first is federal grants, the second is work study, and the third is student loans. Now, these programs combined annually add up to more than $150 billion that's going out to students every single year from the U.S. government. So we're the most significant source of financial aid for students in the nation. Grants, as the name would imply, are free money, doesn't have to be repaid. We love that, right? Work study, as the name might apply, means that you're going to work while you're concurrently enrolled in college or university. So you'll be earning some income on the side and also pursuing your college studies. Student loans are what we call self-help aid, meaning that either you or your parents will be borrowing on behalf of the student, and then once the student leaves school or graduates, then the repayment begins on those student loans. Quickly to go over the grants, I won't read them all because they're on the slide in front of you. Our flagship grant is the Federal Pell Grant. Next, we have the FSEOG grant. We have a grant specifically for teachers called the Teach Grant. And we have a grant for individuals that lost a parent as a result of military service in either Iraq or Afghanistan. So these are grants that you're automatically considered for when you complete the FAFSA. So that's the good news. You don't have to apply for anything separately. There's no additional paperwork. You do one FAFSA form and you're being considered for all of these grant type programs. Again, grants don't have to be repaid. So these are not student loans. They're not work study. It is essentially free money to the student to help pay for their qualified educational expenses. Federal Work Study is a really great program. It provides part-time jobs for undergraduate and graduate students who have demonstrated financial need and allows them to earn money and help pay for their educational expenses. You can work on campus, you can work for qualified corporations or nonprofit organizations, community service organizations, etc. You will make at least minimum wage. However, not all colleges participate in the Federal Work Study program. So it's worth your while if you're considering a school and you're interested in work study, just to inquire with the financial aid office whether or not they participate in the federal work study programs. There are many different types of federal education loans. We have the Perkins loan, which is typically administered by colleges themselves using federal money. We have two different types of direct loans, one's subsidized, one's unsubsidized, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. And we also have a plus direct loan that's for parents or graduate and professional students. And really the biggest difference between all of these is there are some interest rate differences, and also there are differences in the amount that a student or parent can borrow under these programs. And as a student progresses through school, they're able to borrow higher student loan amounts. And the rationale is that an incoming first-year freshman can borrow the least, and that's because he or she has not yet demonstrated their academic ability and has not demonstrated that they're going to be able to repay their student loans. Let's go to the next slide. I mentioned that there are subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans essentially are loans where the government is going to pay the interest while the student is in an eligible period, such as you're currently in school, or you're in your grace period after leaving school, or you're in some other eligible period like a deferment or forbearance. The amount ranges based upon year in school from $3,000 to $8,000. And the interest rate, which I'm going to touch on in more detail in just a second, is basically tied to a treasury bill, the 10-year treasury bill. Unsubsidized loans, however, the student is responsible for the interest that accrues while the student's in school or during those other eligible periods. It has a fixed rate, which is very good. Both of these loans do. And it's for undergraduate or graduate students who qualify. The amounts are a little higher. With the unsubsidized loans, you can borrow from $5,500 up to $20,500. So more borrowing capacity under the unsubsidized loans. I'll take just a moment to look at some of the questions that have come in to see if I can answer some of those. A few of you have mentioned volume. I hope that the volume is better. I've maxed out the volume on my end, so hopefully you are able to hear me at this point. We have a question here from Jason. Jason says he's a retired police officer and he's currently on tax-free disability pension. Do I claim that pension, and if so, where on the FAFSA? Basically, with the FAFSA, we are going to be looking at your liquid assets and your income, and we want to determine the individual's ability to pay for their own educational expenses. However, because your pension is in a special category, I would encourage you to give us a call at 1-800-4-FED-AID. That's 1-800-433-3243. to get more information specifically on your type of pension and whether or not that is going to be included in your FAFSA responses. Let's continue with the interest rate discussion. As you can see on this slide, the interest rates vary. For the Perkins loans, it's a fixed 5% annual rate. For the federal Stafford direct loan for undergraduates, the subsidized rate is 3.86 and the unsubsidized rate is also 3.86. And again, the difference is that for subsidized borrowers, the government will be paying the interest while the student is in school or during other eligible periods. The federal Stafford direct loan graduate is an unsubsidized loan that is fixed at 5.41%. And finally, the PLUS loan, which parents can borrow or graduates and professional students can borrow, it is at a fixed rate of 6.41%. So take a look at this slide to get a better understanding of the interest rates that are going to apply to our student loans. Much more information is available on our website at studentaid.gov if you want to check that out. Let's talk specifically about the FAFSA and how and when we're going to apply. The FAFSA, as you know, stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Your eligibility for financial aid is determined by the information that you put on your FAFSA, and everyone needs to complete a FAFSA if they want to be considered for federal, state, and college financial aid. All three sources flow generally through the FAFSA form. Students are encouraged to file as soon as possible, but if you're a high school senior, the earliest you can apply is January 1st of your high school year. So if you're a high school senior right now, you can apply because as of this presentation airing, it's after January 1st, 2014. If you're a junior in high school, you're going to need to wait until after January 1st, 2015. Adults can apply using the FAFSA at any time. They don't need to wait if you're out of high school. Let's continue on. The next topic is really discussing the FAFSA and giving you a screenshot of what the FAFSA application looks like. When you go to FAFSA.gov, you can see that if you're a returning customer, you can log back into your account and finish an application where you left off, or maybe you want to do an application for the current year. However, if you've never been to the FAFSA website before and you want to start a brand new FAFSA, you can do that by clicking the button on the left. We have help online with the FAFSA. We have financial aid experts that are standing by to converse in both English and in Spanish. You can get online real-time help by clicking on the dialog box within FAFSA.gov, and a financial aid expert will be able to engage with you through a dialog box right there on the FAFSA and answer your questions, so you don't have to leave the session at all. You can get your questions answered while you're in the middle of your FAFSA session. What you need to know is that you have to do the FAFSA every single year that you plan to be enrolled in college, right? Because you want to be considered for financial aid. As I mentioned, January 1st of the senior year is the earliest that high school seniors can apply. Adults can apply at any time. When you complete the FAFSA, we're going to assign you what we call a PIN, a personal identification number. If you want to get one in advance, you certainly can by going to our website, studentaid.gov or pin.ed.gov. If you don't want to get one in advance, which is what the majority of our customers do, then just go ahead when it's time to do your FAFSA at fafsa.gov, and we will assign you a PIN in real time. Very easy process. And always the earlier the better, because federal funds typically don't run out. However, many of the state programs, the state in which you reside may have state financial aid programs, and often those funds do run out or expire. So it's very important, high school seniors, that you apply as soon as possible after January 1st. And don't wait to do your taxes. If you haven't done your taxes yet, go ahead and do your FAFSA and use your prior year tax return, plug in that information. Then when you do your taxes for the year, go back to FAFSA and update. It's very easy to do. We don't want you to miss the deadline, so go ahead and get your FAFSA in as soon as you can after January 1st. Let's take a look and see if any other questions have come in. Joshua, I think we answered your question about the tax return, hopefully. Let me know if not. Susie asks if she can get a copy of the presentation, and we're absolutely happy to provide that. All of the information I'm sharing is in the public domain, and you're free to take it and use it. You may very well have a print option on this interactive screen. I'm not sure. If not, we will find a way to get the presentation to all of you. Christine asks if the interest rate is still tax deductible, and it is up to certain income parameters. So you will need to check with your tax return provider, whether you use a proprietary company or whether you go to someone like H&R Block, you use TurboTax or whatever you use. They're going to let you know what the income parameters are for having the tax advantage of having student loan debt. Let me see the other questions that are coming in. Another listener asked, why is it better to complete the FAFSA as soon as possible? And again, it's important not so much for the federal programs, but for the state programs, because they do have state deadlines. Let's see what other questions have come in. Renee asks about the PIN and whether or not it carries over from one year to the next, and it sure does. That is your PIN for the entire time that you or your child are in college, so you can use it every single time you do your FAFSA. If for some reason you forget your PIN or you have the wrong PIN for some reason, you can go to the website pin.ed.gov to either refresh your PIN or get a brand new one. Christopher asks, he says, I've applied to 14 colleges. Wow, that's a lot, Christopher. I can only put 10 schools on my FAFSA list, and that's true. I expect to be accepted to all the schools I have, but have only heard from 5 so far. How do I include all my schools? Well, that's a great question. The vast majority of our customers, we had over 20 million FAFSAs submitted last year. 99% of those people listed only one college. And the reason is you typically do your FAFSA later in the process. Most people have already applied for admission to college. Maybe they've already heard back even by the time they do their FAFSA. So most people just list one college. However, you can list all 10 schools and make sure that the schools have drawn down your FAFSA data in order to process a financial aid award for you if you are accepted to that institution. The thing that they draw down is called an ISIR. You don't really need to remember that, but it's the Institutional Student Information Record, ISIR. Once those 10 schools have drawn that down, which typically happens within a few hours of you doing your FAFSA, then they are able to do your financial aid award at that point. And you can go back into your FAFSA session, log back in with your PIN, and replace as many of the 10 schools as you want with new schools, and they then will get the updated FAFSA information as well. So put the 10 in, get the FAFSA processed. The 10 schools will all get that information if your FAFSA is successfully processed within hours. And then you can go back in within a couple of days and replace the schools that you want to with new schools so that they can also get your processed FAFSA data. The question is, are colleges updated every time FAFSA is updated? From Nasser. Yes, absolutely. Every single time that you make a change to your FAFSA, the schools that you have listed on your FAFSA will get updated records, letting them know that you've made a change on your FAFSA. It's all electronic, seamless. It's a really fast and efficient process for you and the schools. Ryan asks, if you don't fill out the FAFSA until January, how do you know your estimated award from a school if you apply for early action? That's an excellent question, and you really won't, because the earliest anybody in the nation can apply for financial aid is January 1st of the senior year in high school. So if you've applied for early admission or early action at a college or university, typically they were able to tell you what types of school aid you're going to be receiving, but it's harder for them to estimate what financial aid you'll be receiving. So if you want, you can go to the FAFSA website and check out the FAFSA Forecaster. FAFSA Forecaster is a tool that younger individuals can use in order to get an early estimation about their financial aid awards. So if you're a sophomore or junior in high school, you can go to FAFSA.gov and click on FAFSA Forecaster to get an early idea of what your financial aid is going to be. But Ryan, if you are already a high school senior, you've already applied for early action, it's after January 1st of your senior year. So just go online and do your FAFSA now, and then your school will get that information and they'll be able to package your award. Another question came in, and what about college freshmen? When do I reapply for funds again? Well, keep in mind the FAFSA is an annual process. You're going to apply at FAFSA.gov every single year that you anticipate being enrolled in college or university. So your freshman year, sophomore year, and continuing on even through graduate school, law school, whatever you might pursue. Every year that you're going to be in school, you're going to do a FAFSA. Mauricio asks, does it matter what order I list my colleges on the form? And it does not. That is just a random listing. They're all going to get your processed FAFSA information at the exact same time. So listing one college before the other won't be a disadvantage at all. Daniela asks about the assets that are included on the FAFSA, the asset disclosure for parents. And basically, we would need to get an understanding about the income and assets of you and your family, if applicable. So we're going to ask that you provide your income and asset information on the FAFSA, Daniela. And your parents, if applicable, we're going to ask them to list their income and asset information on the FAFSA as well. Now, asset information does not include the primary residence, typically the home that you guys live in. However, it will include everything else. So stocks and bonds, it's going to include any investments, commercial property, rental property, things like that. So we just want to be able to compare all these millions of applicants throughout the nation to make sure that everybody's getting the aid that they're eligible for. And we want to determine which families have a greater ability to pay and which have a higher amount of financial need. Now, Sarah asks, are students automatically considered for state aid by submitting the FAFSA? Absolutely. When you complete the FAFSA, you're going to tell us what state you live in. So that state will automatically receive your processed FAFSA data, and they will calculate your aid awards for you. So for example, if you live in the state of Arkansas, you're going to list that on your FAFSA. You could say, here's my name, here's my address, I live in the state of Arkansas. When you submit your FAFSA to the U.S. Department of Education at fafsa.gov, we're going to calculate all the data and numbers that you put on your FAFSA form. We're going to respond back to you within a day telling you your federal aid eligibility. And we're also going to include information about your state aid eligibility, so the aid from the state of Arkansas for which you're eligible. In addition, most colleges and universities also use the FAFSA in order to make their institutional awards. So that's why the FAFSA is so important. It's how you learn about your federal, your state, and your college financial aid eligibility. Let's move on through another couple of slides. Some of the basic eligibility requirements are that you need to have a high school diploma or a GED certificate, or have completed a homeschooling program that was certified in your state. And the reason we do this is we want you to demonstrate that you're academically prepared to pursue a post-secondary education. Federal student aid is backed up by taxpayer funds. We want to make sure it's a good investment and that you are well positioned to succeed in your college studies. Students also need a social security number with limited exceptions. Limited exceptions are for individuals from the Pacific Trust Territories, so Palau, Guam, etc. You need to be a U.S. citizen or to be an eligible non-citizen, and an eligible non-citizen is in one of the following categories. Either they're a U.S. national, or they are a U.S. permanent resident, or their passport has been stamped with certain conditions, arrival departure records that indicate that the student is in a certain classified position, such as an asylum seeker or a victim of human trafficking, etc. So these individuals typically know who they are and they know about their immigration status, their citizenship status. But if you don't, you can take a look at studentaid.gov to get a full description of all of the non-eligible citizen categories and determine whether or not you're going to be in one of those categories. If you're not an eligible non-citizen or a citizen, then you are not eligible for federal student aid. However, you may be eligible for aid from the state in which you reside and from the college in which you plan to attend. Finally, gentlemen, you need to be registered with the U.S. Elective Service. Also, students need to be enrolled or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program. You need to pursue a degree or certificate or credential, again, demonstrating that your studies are leading to something that's going to help you enter the marketplace and get a job. And you also need to maintain what we call satisfactory academic progress. This essentially is saying that you are going to make the minimal grades that your college or university requires you to make. Let's take a look at a few more questions. A question from Carlos. He says, my daughter is a senior in high school. Why does she need a separate student login? Well, keep in mind, Carlos, that the FAFSA is always the student's application. The parents may be required to put information on the student's application, but the student owns it. It is really their official federal form. That is why they need their own uh, credentials, their name, the date of birth, and they need their own PIN. Now, if a parent is going to be providing information on the child's FAFSA, they're going to need their own PIN as well. Both the parent and the student will use these PINs at the end of the FAFSA session to electronically sign the FAFSA and submit it to us, the Department of Education. But yes, both parties, parent and child or student, need to have their own PIN. A question from Laura. Do you fill out one FAFSA per family, or does a student need to fill out a separate FAFSA? Every student needs to fill out their own FAFSA. Think about it as if you were riding a bus or a subway, everybody needs their own ticket. So if you have two students that are going to be enrolled in college at the same time, both students will do their own FAFSA at fafsa.gov, and you, the parent, will put your information into both students' FAFSAs. Now, the good news is, when you sit down with the first student in order to complete their FAFSA, they'll enter their information. Laura, you'll enter your information as the parent. When it comes time to do the second student's FAFSA, your parental information will automatically be plugged into the second student's FAFSA. So that's going to save you a lot of time and typing, and we found it really reduces errors. Parents love it. So if you have multiple students that are enrolled in college at the same time, after you and the first student have done the FAFSA, your parental information will automatically be populated into all the subsequent FAFSAs. Question from Keith. He says, I've already filled out my FAFSA. When do I get the results showing what I'm eligible for? Well, if you provided an email address, Keith, the results come really fast, typically within about 48 hours. And the reason it takes that long, even though that's pretty fast, is because we need to do a lot of federal database matches with all of the 20 million plus applicants that are applying for federal student aid. We do a match with the Social Security Administration for valid social. We do a match with DHS, Department of Homeland Security, for citizenship. We do a match with our own database, the National Student Loan Data System, to make sure the student doesn't have defaulted loan or outstanding debts, outstanding due debts with us, the Department of Education. So if you provided an email address, it's going to be really fast, a couple of days. If you do not provide an email address, we'll have to mail you the response, and obviously that's going to take a little longer, about 7 to 10 days. Desta asks, I usually have to file an extension on my taxes, resulting in filing date in October. With respect to FAFSA, I understand I can submit using my prior year taxes, but will October be too late to update the FAFSA if my student starts in the fall? Not at all. So Desta, go ahead and get your student's FAFSA done as soon as you can, assuming that the student is a high school senior right now or already a student in college. And then when you do your taxes for the year in October, go back to FAFSA and make an update. See, most students are going to be enrolled in the fall. And so even though you're waiting until October, that's right about the time that schools are making their first disbursements to students anyway. So August, September, October timeframe is typically when schools are going to make the first awards of financial aid to their students that are enrolled. Let's continue on with a few of our other slides. As you're filling out the FAFSA, obviously you're going to want to keep the Social Security number of both the student and the parent handy. It's not mandatory, but keep the student's driver's license number handy. If you're not a U.S. citizen, you may want to have your alien registration number handy to put on the form, and your tax return information. If you've done your taxes for the year, plug in that information. If you have not, you can use your prior year tax return and put that information in your FAFSA and submit it. And then when you do your taxes for the year, go back to FAFSA and update. It's very easy to do. We do allow people to do what we call an IRS Data Retrieval, which is if you are completing your FAFSA and you have already done your taxes, then in many instances you can pull in the required tax return information directly from the IRS database. It's very fast, very easy to do. But there are some stipulations around who's eligible. So when you're completing your FAFSA session, we're going to let you know whether or not the IRS Data Retrieval is available for you specifically. And there are some other records that you're going to want to keep handy while you're doing your FAFSA form. I won't read those to you. They're all on this slide. Let's talk about dependency status. One of the most frequent questions we get is whose information goes on the FAFSA? Well, typically it's going to be the student's information, who's high school senior, and the parent's information. Now, that's because we consider that FAFSA applicant, that student, to be a dependent student. And students have to provide their parental information if they're in one of the following categories on this slide. So we have specific questions on the FAFSA, and they're in these categories. Are you at least 24 years or older? Is the student married? Is the student pursuing graduate studies? Does the student have children or others that they support at least half time? Was the student in foster care since turning age 13? Is the student an emancipated minor as declared by a court in which the state in which the student resides? Is the student currently, or were they in a legal guardianship? Is the student currently at risk of being homeless? And is the student a veteran of the U.S. Armed Services? If a FAFSA applicant answers no to all of these questions, the applicant is automatically dependent, their status is dependent, and they need to provide parental information on their FAFSA. So answering no to all these questions means you're dependent for FAFSA purposes, and you must provide parental information. If the FAFSA applicant answers yes to at least one of these questions, they're automatically independent and don't need to provide parental information. Much more information on the dependency status is available on our website at studentaid.gov if you want to explore it more in detail. But just keep in mind that if you answer no to all of the questions on the FAFSA around dependency status, you are dependent and need to provide parental information. And keep in mind also that the FAFSA dependency status the rules are completely different than the IRS rules. We really don't care whether or not a student was claimed on a parent's tax return. We care about these 13 questions and whether or not the student is able to answer yes to one of these questions. There are some special circumstances which would mean that even though the student answered no to all of those previous questions and would technically be dependent, we're going to allow that person to be considered independent. The special circumstances are listed on this slide, and examples include if the parent or parents are in jail, if the student really was forced from home to an abusive situation, if the parents are gone from the student's life, etc. We hear about some really heart-rending situations where students are, kicked out of their house or parents are using drugs. Some really unfortunate situations, unfortunately, today. So if the student thinks that they're in one of these special circumstance situations, there are specific questions on the FAFSA where they can indicate that. And what's going to happen is we're going to then require that the student have a one-on-one conversation with a financial aid officer at the college that they want to attend to really talk about this situation so that the financial aid officer can really get a better understanding of the student's circumstances and to verify that the student is indeed in one of these special circumstances and should not be required to provide parental information. These are on a case-by-case basis. Financial aid officers are very careful in their review of the special circumstance requests, and their decision, the officer's decision, is not appealable to us, the U.S. Department of Education. So before you approach the college or university, make sure you really have any documentation that you need. Make sure you have witnesses or others that can corroborate the information that you're providing. Just make sure that you're making your case in a very clear and concise way so that the financial aid officer can clearly see that you have a special circumstance and will grant you independent FAFSA status. So what can we expect to happen after we apply? This is a high-level overview of some of the key steps in the FAFSA. Obviously, the student or the parent's going to complete the FAFSA. They're going to sign it with their PINs, both the parent and the student. Next, we, the Department of Education, are going to process that FAFSA. The student will receive what's called a Student Aid Report, or SAR. And as I mentioned earlier, at the same time, the colleges that you've listed on your FAFSA will receive a processed electronic report of your FAFSA. That's called an ISO. You don't need to remember that. Just know that the schools you list on your FAFSA, they also get your updated FAFSA information. That school or schools are going to review the information and assemble an award package just for you, tailored to your needs based upon the FAFSA data. You, the student, are going to review the package, You're going to compare it maybe to other award offers that you've received from other schools. And you're ultimately going to make a decision about whether or not you want to accept the aid offer or amend it in some way. Keep in mind that if schools offer you a mix of financial aid, for example, a grant and a scholarship, work study and a student loan, maybe you decide to decline the student loan, for example, often they're going to look to you to come up with the missing money. So they're going to do their very best to meet your financial need. And if you decide to alter that package in any way, they're often going to look to you to help make up the difference. And finally, a few applications are selected for what we call verification. This is just our quality assurance check to make sure that information people are putting on their FAFSA is accurate and comprehensive. And so if you're selected for verification, it's not really a big deal. We're just going to ask you to bring in some documents to the college or university you want to attend so that they can take a look at them and compare them to the information that you listed on your FAFSA. Again, this is our way of making sure that we're good stewards of taxpayer money. We want to make sure that people are self-reporting in an honest and comprehensive way. The next slide is giving you an example of what a sample award letter looks like. Let's assume that your financial need is $13,000. The school is going to meet that through a variety of programs. In this instance, scholarship, different types of grants, and loans. So each of them are contributing as pieces of a puzzle to your total financial aid package and helping pay the bill at the college or university you want to attend. Let's talk about some of the resources that we have available. First and foremost, I've mentioned a couple of times, is our flagship website, studentaid.gov. This is a screenshot of the home page. You'll see that we have some profiles of students there. And basically, this is just designed around what we call the student aid lifecycle. The gentleman on the left, the question is, how do I prepare for college? So any of you that are making those very early decisions about, can I go to college? How can I go to college? The information for you is going to be specifically listed in that section. And the information continues on all the way to the right, to the young lady that asks, how do I manage my student loans? So regardless of where you fall in the student aid life cycle, whether you're just starting, somewhere in the middle, or maybe you're a current college student or you're repaying your student loans, information is listed here in a way that will help you quickly and easily find information that's tailored to where you are in the student aid life cycle. Again, information on this website is available in both English and in Spanish, and we have thoroughly tested this with lots and lots of students, and they found it to be very, very impactful and value added for them. So I hope that you will as well, and please do make a point of checking it out. Like many organizations that are out there, we try to have a presence on various social media. We have a Facebook page. It's called Federal Student Aid is the name of the page. And feel free to be a fan of our page and to follow our news and update. We update this very regularly, and we have thousands of followers. And so it's a great way to get information in a seamless way while you're checking your Facebook account. If you use Twitter, you can also follow us on Twitter at FAFSA. And the Twitter handle is twitter.com/FAFSA. We have lots of videos on YouTube, and we know that people learn in many different ways. Some people want to read, some people want to listen. So the videos on YouTube are around a wide array of topics, everything from financial aid programs to applying via the FAFSA. And it's at youtube.com/Federal Student Aid. So feel free to check those out as well. At this time, let me take a look and see if any other questions have come in from the participants. This question is from, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Munkundan. Thank you for your question. You say, I've heard that it's better to fill out the CSS profile first if you're going to do both it and the FAFSA. Why is it so? Well, the CSS profile, or the College Scholarship Search Profile, is required by a few institutions around the country. It is not the FAFSA. It's a completely separate form and a separate process. Some schools use the CSS profile because, in addition to the FAFSA, they want to drill down and get a lot more specific financial and demographic information about their prospective students. So it really doesn't matter whether you do the FAFSA first or the CSS profile first. If your school requires them, you're going to have to do both anyway. But keep in mind that the FAFSA is really driving your financial aid package, so it's crucial that you do it as soon as possible after January 1st of your senior year. Dominique asks, do you get your PIN from when you first start your FAFSA? And that's absolutely right, Dominique. You could either get one well in advance of doing your FAFSA at pin.ed.gov, or you can get a PIN when you're actually doing your FAFSA online. So if you're a high school senior or an adult, you can go online tonight to fafsa.gov and begin your application, and we will assign you a PIN in real time, which you can use then to sign your FAFSA electronically. There are a lot of questions about the tax returns, and again, I'll just emphasize to hopefully address as many of these as I can at once. If you have not done your taxes for the year, go ahead and do your FAFSA anyway, and use your prior year tax return if it reflects where you and your family are today financially. If the prior year tax return does not reflect where you are, for example, maybe it shows a job that mom doesn't have anymore, then estimate based upon where you and your family are right now. So either use your prior year tax return or estimate to get your FAFSA in so that you meet your deadlines. And then when you do your FAFSA for the year, go back to the FAFSA.gov site and update. It's very easy to do. A lot of tax questions. I think that's on our mind right now, isn't it? It's almost tax time. Okay, this question from Matthew. How do I check to see if the school received my ISER? Do you call them directly? Well, the good news is you really don't need to check. If the school was listed on your FAFSA, they absolutely will electronically automatically receive your processed FAFSA data. So the work on your end is to make sure that your FAFSA is complete and that there are no errors. And the way you find that out is through your student aid report. After you do your FAFSA, if you provide an email address, again, within 48 hours, we're going to send you an electronic student aid report via email, and it's going to tell you if you have any omissions or errors that you need to correct on your FAFSA. If it's fully processed and good to go, then the schools will, in very short order, also receive your processed FAFSA data, and they are then able to make financial aid awards. So if you want to contact them because you just want to be proactive, you certainly can. But just know that this is a process that happens every single day for millions and millions of records. And it's a seamless process. It's electronic, it's automatic. So we don't want students to feel like they have to check to make sure that the school received their ISER. But if you just wanted to be extra careful, take that extra step, I respect that. You certainly can give the financial aid office a call at the school or schools you want to attend and say, hey, I listed you on my FAFSA. Just want to double check, make sure you got my processed ISER record. Elizabeth asks about workstudy and whether or not it's a separate application. Workstudy is not a separate application. The good news is when you complete your FAFSA, you're being considered for all of the federal programs, the grant programs I mentioned earlier, the federal workstudy, and all of the federal student loans. In addition, you're being considered for any state financial aid programs for which you might be eligible, and college financial aid. So that one shot with a FAFSA does it all. Okay, just scanning through your questions here. Laura asks if you can start your FAFSA in your junior year, and unfortunately you cannot. Everyone in the nation needs to wait until at least January 1st of their senior year in high school to do their FAFSA. Adults can apply at any time. But Laura, if you wanted an early insight into what your financial aid eligibility might be, you can complete our FAFSA forecaster, which is also available at the FAFSA.gov website. A question from Scott. Scott said, my parents filled out the FAFSA back in November using 2012 tax return information. Should they go into the application and estimate their 2013 taxes? A representative at my high school said that we have to complete the application by March 1st. But if my parents have not filled out their taxes by then, what happens? Well, Scott, again, it's really good that the school told you about this fairly early deadline for you. It sounds like the deadline in your state is at the beginning of March. So you absolutely want to go online to FAFSA.gov and complete your 2013 FAFSA as soon as you can, regardless of whether your parents have done their tax return. And again, when your parents have done their 12 taxes, you're going to go online to FAFSA.gov and just update. It's very easy to do. So again, the tax return that's due for all of us now is a 2012 tax return. And if your parents have not done that yet, go ahead and do your FAFSA. And when they do the 2012 taxes, you'll go back to FAFSA and update. It's very easy to do. Um, most of us, unless you're estimating or doing quarterly payments, aren't working on our 2013 tax return yet. I'm sorry, I think I said that backwards. It's 2014. So yes, the 2013 tax return is the one that is due. My apologies. So again, if you haven't done your 2013 taxes, it's not a problem. Go back to FAFSA.gov and just update once you've done your 2013 taxes. We're in a brand new year. It's 2014. I can't believe it. Okay, a question from Bina. She said that her son has early admission to a few colleges. Congratulations, Bina, to you and your son. If he qualifies for financial aid, will they wait until he accepts admission and send him financial aid offers? The financial aid package is going to determine where he will go eventually. Absolutely, I understand that. So the school typically is not going to make a financial aid offer until they get the FAFSA. So even though it was offered early admission, you're not going to get really your detailed financial aid information until you and your son have completed his FAFSA application. So get that in on FAFSA.gov as soon as you can. Even if you haven't done your 2013 taxes, go ahead and complete your FAFSA. I'm going to move through some of the other slides quickly, and then I'll come back to your questions. If you want to contact us at any time after viewing this presentation, feel free to give us a call. I've mentioned the number. It's 1-800-4FED-AID. That's 1-800-433-3243. We have financial aid experts standing by that can converse in English and in Spanish, and they can answer any question you have about where your FAFSA is in the process, about specific questions on the FAFSA, or anything to do with the financial aid process itself. In addition, we have some really great web resources you might want to check out. Our flagship website, studentaid.gov. The application itself is at FAFSA.gov. And for individuals that counsel students, this is for our peers in the field, the professionals, high school counselors, college access professionals, etc. You can check out our professionals website, which is fsaforcounselors.ed.gov. Now, the hours for our call center are basically 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so that accommodates most of the country during extended business hours. Next, I wanted to talk about a few additional resources we have. If you're still in the process of comparing colleges, feel free to check out our college scorecard. It's an online tool that's really going to make it easier for you to compare colleges to get information such as net price, graduation rates, default rates, student loan debt, earnings potential, etc. And that's at collegecost.ed.gov. You can also check out the College Navigator site. It's available at nces.ed.gov. All colleges and universities are required to report to us a wide array of information, and we format that and put it in really useful chunks on this website. So feel free to check out College Navigator to get a lot more information about finding a college that's going to be a right fit for you. You can do college searches based upon where the school is, the type of programs that they offer, whether it's religiously affiliated or not, the faculty-student ratio, whether it's an urban school or rural school, etc. So this is a really great website to check out for those of you that are still in the college selection stage. Many schools are also adopting what's called a financial aid shopping sheet. And this is very helpful because it streamlines and makes uniform financial aid offers from colleges. Now, not every school has this, but more than likely, if you're applying to more than one school and they're calculating a financial aid package, it's going to come to you in a format that looks very similar to this. And we've asked colleges to do this because we know that sometimes it's hard to really analyze financial aid award letters when they're so different. So we thought that if they were a little more standardized, students and their families could easily make comparisons among the aid offers that they're receiving. We also have information on budgeting and borrowing at the College Cost website, so feel free to check that out and make sure that you're going to a school that's going to be a worthwhile investment for you. We have the budgeting and borrowing fact tool on the website at studentaid.gov, and it's really going to help you make informed decisions about um, where you are in your spending and the types of things you're spending on and your savings, and how to give fresh thought to what you need to do to pay for college. Quickly, let's cover some of the scholarships and state aid and institutional aid information. The sources of money for college, as I've mentioned, the biggest source is the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education. Um, I think virtually every state in the nation also has state financial aid that they award to students. And again, that information is calculated based upon your FAFSA. That's why FAFSA is crucial. Colleges and universities also have financial aid, as do private foundations, employers, private companies, and professional and service organizations. Each of these entities are involved in the financial aid arena. Scholarships, in addition to doing the FAFSA, you'll want to do an independent scholarship search. There are many ways you can go about that. Lots of people just do an internet browser search. For example, you could go onto Google and search for scholarships. We also have a scholarship search on our website at studentaid.gov. It's absolutely free. You can do a keyword search to look for valid, legitimate scholarships that are available. So for example, if you type the word Spanish, it's going to bring up every single scholarship in the nation that's even remotely related to studying or speaking Spanish. Now keep in mind there are some scams and some fraudulent websites out there. We encourage you to never pay to be considered for a scholarship, and be very wary of the type of information that you're providing in order to be considered for a scholarship. We want you to be informed consumers. And again, all the scholarships that are listed on our website are ones that have been vetted to be legitimate scholarships. State aid, just as federal aid, comes in many forms. It can be grants, it can be scholarships, it can be loans. So it will vary based upon where in the nation you live and how much money your state has devoted to state financial aid. So we will automatically tell you what you qualify for if you do your FAFSA form. You'll also want to do your own research just to make sure nothing fell through the gaps. It shouldn't, but it's a worthwhile investment of your time to understand what the programs are in your state, whether you have, for example, a lottery scholarship, or whether you have other types of aid that are given out to residents of the state. And be aware of your state deadlines. The federal government doesn't really have a FAFSA deadline. Our FAFSA runs on an 18th month consecutive cycle, but most states do have deadlines for state aid, and those typically start occurring around the 1st of March, as we heard earlier from our student. So let me take one last look at the questions that might have come in. We have less than 10 minutes to go, so I'll see if I can find some that have not yet come in. Karen asks, if no aid is given to a student, do they get that information from the college? Colleges typically will not award aid or even attempt to award aid unless they have the student's FAFSA. So Karen, if you or your child, the student, did not complete a FAFSA, that may be why no financial aid was awarded. It's critical to do your FAFSA. Christine asks, does the completion of the signature page affect the process of FAFSA when applying to schools? It does not. And what Christine is referring to is for individuals that either do not have or are unable to attain a PIN, you can print at the time you're doing your FAFSA a signature page, and you will sign that and mail that in to us. But keep in mind that extends the FAFSA process and makes it less speedy for you. And if you're bumping up against state deadlines, you want to make sure that your signature page is received by us, the Department of Education, as soon as you can mail it to us. And we certainly would encourage you to consider doing your FAFSA with a PIN, because it's going to make that process so much faster for you. Dawn asks about school codes. This are the colleges or universities you're going to list on your FAFSA. What if the school I want to list isn't in your list of codes? Well, we have more than 6,000 colleges and universities on our school code list, and we think that it's very comprehensive. However, if you believe that one school has not been included, then you will need to do one of two things. First, contact the institution and make sure that they participate in our federal student aid programs. That's all you need to ask. Their answer will either be yes or no. If they do not participate in our federal student aid programs, that's why they're not listed in the school codes, and you cannot receive any type of federal student aid at that institution. If they say that they do participate in the federal student aid programs, then ask them what their code is so you can put it on the FAFSA. If neither of those work, you can give us a call at 1-800-4FED-AID to make sure that nothing has been overlooked with regard to your school code. I think we have time for one last question. Alyssa asks about the website where she can find scholarships. There are a lot of scholarship websites, and many ways you can go about finding them. You can talk to a high school guidance counselor at the high school you attend. You can go to our website, which is studentaid.gov, to look for scholarships via a free scholarship search tool. You can also do an online search, but again, be very wary. There are some fraudulent companies or individuals that will take advantage of you. So we want you to be an informed consumer and be very judicious in your research about the scholarships to make sure that you're applying for valid, legitimate scholarships. I think we have time maybe for one final question. Sydney asks about receiving the aid award letter and when it's going to be sent to the student. And keep in mind that it depends on when you've done your FAFSA. Schools typically will not do any type of financial aid awards until they have received your processed FAFSA data. So it's very critical you do your FAFSA as soon as possible and list the college that you want to attend on that FAFSA so that they can calculate your financial aid package and communicate that to you, and you can make a decision about whether or not to send that school. And with that, I think we are almost out of time. I want to thank you for participating in today's session. It's been a pleasure to share this information with you. I know we've covered a lot of information quickly, but hopefully it's been helpful in enabling you to make more informed decisions about your post-secondary education. Thank you so much.